Ready to make history, baby? I looked over toward Sheila as she stood on the gangplank leading up to the Burger. I still couldn't believe she named our research ship the Burger. Emotional relevance be damned. It's not exactly history, I corrected. Oh, come on. If your survey is right, this trench might even run deeper than the Challenger Deep. And you're going to be the first person to explore it. How is that not exciting? Might be deeper. We only have a limited amount of topological data. And even if it is deeper, we're talking only a few hundred feet at most. It's really not that... Sheila silenced me with a kiss. Nerd, she teased, and I found myself too flustered to reply. After 5 years of marriage, she could still leave me speechless with just a kiss. God, how did someone like me end up with a woman like that? Then again, how did someone like me end up where I was in general? It was honestly a little overwhelming. Standing on the dock, getting ready to board that ship and join the ranks of Jacques Piccard and James Cameron. Yes, that James Cameron. As one of the few people to take a manned submersible down to the deepest parts of the ocean. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little scared, too. Diving down that deep could easily be a one-way trip, even if the slightest thing went wrong. My submarine would be experiencing between 600 and 1100 atmospheres of pressure, and while we tested it over and over again to make sure it would actually be up for the challenge, there was still a lingering iota of doubt in the back of my mind. All that needed to go wrong was one little thing, and that would be it for me. The scariest part is that I probably wouldn't even know what had happened. I'd simply be gone, and Sheila would be alone. The thought of that caused a momentary spike of panic in my chest that almost made me want to call this whole thing off. Almost. But then I felt her hand close around mine. I looked up into her blue eyes and saw her gentle smile. You're gonna be okay, hon, she promised. You and your team have been running the numbers, right? It's gonna go just fine. I nodded slowly. It's gonna go fine, I repeated before she leaned in to kiss me, and gently pulled me up by the wrist onto the deck of the Burger. She was probably right. It probably would be fine. Probably. The trench I'd been exploring was a fairly recent discovery, located south of Greenland in a vast stretch of water situated directly between Newfoundland and Iceland. It had been uncovered during a topological survey in the area, and my team had taken an interest in investigating it further. At minimum, it was believed to descend to about 35,000 feet deep, over 10,000 meters, although the current theory was that it might run even deeper. Determining the exact depth of the yet unnamed chasm was just one of the intents of our dive. The rest was studying the organisms that might be found down there, and how they might have differed from the other ones found in other deep ocean trenches, some variation being expected given the isolated environment they were developing in. I had to admit it would be exciting to see what new life might have developed in a place such as this, especially if it ran even deeper than our predictions. And that excitement was enough to make me chase the fear of the risks out of my mind, even if it was only briefly. When Sheila went to make sure we were ready to embark, I caught myself wandering out towards the rear of the ship where my submarine, the Tempura, waited for me. Did this submarine deserve a better name than the Tempura? Probably. But this was my project, so I got to name it, and since Burger was already taken, Tempura was the next best name I had. I like to think that the sub's namesake might approve, if she hadn't died 15 years ago. Shrimp don't live very long. As the ship began to depart, I caught myself reminiscing on how I'd ended up here. It really was all because of those damn shrimp, wasn't it? Well, maybe not all because of the shrimp, but they were certainly a part of it. Back when I was younger, I never really gave much of a shit about anything at all. I guess I did have a thing for the ocean. The great romantic vastness of it. The sense of adventure that it beckoned with. The endless mysteries that lay within its dark depths. I used to read about it all the time when I was a kid, and I especially loved the classic adventures. Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and Melville's Moby Dick. But that love was just confined to my books. I didn't really have any interest in actually going out and seeing the ocean. Hell, the idea of going to a beach and standing in the sun with my toes in the sand seemed miserable to me. I was happier, although calling myself happy might have been a little bit disingenuous, alone in my room, enjoying the company of books as opposed to people. Then came the shrimp. One of my online friends kept them as a hobby. He used to post pictures of his tanks all the time, and I always thought they looked kind of cool. He said that if I was interested in them, I should try keeping some for myself. And during a particularly bad bout of depression, I figured that maybe it might be worth a shot. So I bought a cheap tank and some cheap decorations, bought myself some shrimp, and promptly watched them die over the next few weeks. That bothered me. I don't know why, but it really bothered me. I'm still not entirely sure how to describe what it was that I was feeling. Guilt? Defeat? Shame? Here I was trying to set up a habitat for these creatures, just to have something to do to keep the suicidal ideation at bay, and I'd failed almost right out of the gate. Was I just that bad? Was I just that much of a failure? Was this just going to go to shit like everything else in my life did because I was such an abysmal piece of shit who barely deserved the life she had? Had I just not tried hard enough? Was I too apathetic? What had happened? What went wrong? It bothered me. It bothered me enough that I made up my mind to just dump the remaining shrimp down the toilet and toss everything. Forget about it. Move on. End of story. But that wasn't fair, was it? The shrimp didn't all deserve to die just because I couldn't be bothered, did they? Sure, they were just shrimp, but they were alive too, just like me. They deserved to be alive. I owed it to them to try to keep them alive, didn't I? So, I didn't dump the shrimp. Instead, I started doing some reading. Started looking into what I was doing wrong and how to do it all better. I actually got really into it, and a few months later, I had a nice planted tank. Looking back, it was amateur shit, but it made me happy. I'd even picked out 2 names for my 2 favorite shrimp, Burger and Tempura. They'd been the last survivors of my original batch, and they were the ones I ended up caring about the most. Caring for Burger and Tempura gave me a purpose. It became an obsession, and that little obsession drove me to finally start turning my life around. Like I said, shrimp don't live for very long. Burger and Tempura were long dead by the time I graduated with a degree in marine biology. But they were the ones who inspired me to finally get my life in order. Hell, the shrimp were half the reason why I met Sheila. She was something of an aquarium fanatic too. We'd met on a forum and gotten to talking. I found out that she just so happened to be studying marine biology at another school, and we bonded pretty quickly after that. After graduation, I moved to California to be with her, and after that, the rest is history. She was my rock. She was the one who always pushed me to be the best possible version of myself. And I loved her more than I ever knew I could love someone. A glance back at the shore, fading into the distance, tore me out of my reminiscing, and I shifted my focus to the present, going over the tempura to perform some quick checks. My colleagues and I would be checking and rechecking the submarine over the next 2 days as we made our way towards the dive spot. Considering the danger that descending the deep posed, I didn't want to take a single unnecessary risk. I had too much to live for, after all. The day of the dive, I couldn't help but notice how excited the rest of the crew seemed. Well, Sheila's usual crew seemed excited. I guess to them this was just another research expedition. No different than the ones Sheila usually took the ship out on. Lately, her research had been focused on the analysis and study of whale calls. Her recent voyages had involved following their pods, recording their calls, and playing them back to see how the whales reacted. It was fascinating stuff, but my research was admittedly a lot different than that. My obsession had drawn me to the denizens of the deep sea. I'd used the Burger for expeditions before, although none of them had been quite on the same scale as this one. Up until today, the most ambitious thing I'd done was send down unmanned submersibles with cameras. Those submersibles had typically returned. We had lost a few early on due to technical glitches, but the past few years had been blissfully uneventful. Logically, this dive would probably be uneventful as well, but it was still hard to get the jitters out of my head. My team and I did the final necessary checks to make sure that the tempura was ready to go, before setting up the crane to begin lifting it up. In less than an hour, I'd be sitting inside of that thing, descending to the darkest depths of the ocean. It didn't feel real. I felt Sheila's hand on my shoulder and looked over at her. "Moment of truth, huh?" she asked. She probably meant it to sound encouraging, but it just sounded ominous. "Moment of truth," I replied. "You're gonna be okay, honey. I know you will." She reached out to gently squeeze my hand and gave me a reassuring smile that I meekly returned. "Yeah, it's gonna be okay," I agreed, although there was an element of a lie in it. Statistically, yes, I probably would be okay, but there was that lingering anxiety in the back of my mind that just wouldn't go away. I looked quietly out at the submarine before me and couldn't shake the thought that it sort of looked like a giant coffin. Unconsciously, I found myself squeezing Sheila's hand tighter than normal. She just held me close and pressed a kiss to the top of my head, before gently rubbing my back. "You'll be okay," she promised. "Dr. Jenner, we're ready for you," I heard one of my colleagues say. Moment of truth. I took one last look at Sheila, and gave her a quick kiss on the lips for luck. She smiled at me, and I smiled back anxiously at her before heading over towards the submarine. The crew helped me enter the cockpit, and I got myself situated inside. The cockpit of the Tempura was fairly cramped and not particularly comfortable. Space and comfort aren't really luxuries you can afford in a submarine like this. The instruments I needed take up a lot of space, leaving little room for me in there, and I'm not a very big person. Once I was inside, they sealed the hatch. Then the diagnostics check began. "Grayson, can you hear us in there?" I heard Sheila say through the radio. "Loud and clear," I replied. "Great. We'll keep in constant radio contact just to monitor the signal. In the meantime, how is everything looking in there?" "Green across the board so far," I said, although I hadn't finished running all of my checks yet. Ultimately, nothing was out of place. This submarine was as good to go as it was going to get. "I'm all good in here," I said once I was done. "You can drop me when you're ready." "You got it, honey. Let's get you in the water, run one final round of tests, and start lowering you down." A short while later, I felt the submarine begin to move as the crane lifted it off the deck and lowered it into the water. The Tempura honestly resembled its namesake in a way, being long and cigar-shaped, only vertically oriented instead of horizontally oriented. We'd admittedly taken more than a few design cues from James Cameron's Deep-Sea Challenger. Why fix what isn't broken, after all? Once I was in the water, a 1,000-pound releasable ballast weight would cause the submarine to sink. Releasing that weight was also my ticket back to the surface, and I could either trigger it from inside the cockpit, or, in the event that the release failed for any reason, it would automatically trigger after roughly 12 hours of exposure to salt water. Ideally, this would be the first of a number of dives I'd be undertaking. If all went according to plan, the Tempura would be the first of many similar submarines that would allow other researchers to safely and effectively descend to extreme depths. If all went well, this could be a massive leap forward for researchers like me, allowing us to better explore the deepest depths of the Hadal Zone, and learn all we could about the ecosystems down there via direct observation. If all went well. If. Through the viewport, I watched as I was lowered into the ocean. A few of the other crew members had donned diving gear to escort me down, and after they did their final checks and I did mine, we were fully ready to go. "All's green across the board," I said into the radio. "You can start my descent." "I hear you, honey," Sheila replied. "We're letting you go. Have fun down there." "Yeah, I'll try," I said quietly, as finally my submarine began its descent. I took a deep breath and told myself again that everything would go fine. We had checked everything on the submarine. We tested it rigorously. I wouldn't have allowed myself to set foot inside of it if I hadn't personally assured that it was safe. But anxiety never really goes away, does it? The crew couldn't accompany me far. After only a few meters, they fell behind me as I sank deeper and deeper into the infinite, empty blue of the ocean. Soon after, the tether was released. I was officially on my own. 60 feet, I heard Sheila say over the radio. "How are you doing in there?" "Good," I replied. Doing good." The submarine continued to descend. Through the viewport, I could see a few stray fish, but nothing particularly eye-catching. I almost felt alone down there. Almost. 120 feet, Sheila said. "Still doing good," I replied. The descent continued as the waters slowly grew darker and darker. 400 feet. Everything around me just kept getting darker and darker. Only a fraction of the light from the sun ever reached these depths. And I'd be lying if I said that darkness didn't feel a little oppressive. 800 feet. Still feeling good? "Yeah, still feeling good," I said, although that was a bit of a lie. If anything, I was second-guessing all of this. But I wasn't about to say that out loud. 1,000 feet. Still good? Still good, I murmured. I hear you loud and clear. Deeper, deeper, deeper. 1,500 feet. 3 miles. I was 3 miles away from home. 3 miles away from Sheila. 2,000 feet. Still a ways to go. 3,000 feet. By this point, it was fully dark outside my cockpit. Outside, all I could see was inky darkness. Even the submarine's lights didn't really cut through it. And the kicker? Relatively speaking, I wasn't that deep. Fishing trawlers reached deeper than this. Better to conserve power until I was at the bottom. My descent continued. 6,000 feet, still good? Still good. The check-ins were becoming less frequent. My descent still continued, deeper, deeper, deeper. By now I'd entered the Haddle Zone. But there was still so much deeper to go. 8,000 feet. This was way past the depths that most whales would dive to, and I still had a ways to go. 10,000 feet. This was close to where the ocean floor usually bottomed out, and yet there was still so much further to go. No, I was really only a third of the way there. How long had it been? Not much had happened beyond my descent and a few sightings out of my viewport, but time had been passing. A glance at my watch confirmed it had been almost an hour since I started to sink, and I knew I wasn't even close to the bottom yet. The submarine continued to descend, sinking ever deeper as I dropped into the infinite darkness that few had ever dared to witness. 15,000 feet. This check-in came later than the others. At this point, Sheila and the crew must have figured that no news was good news, and they were right. I just continued to sink peacefully down into the crushing depths of the ocean. These were the depths that one might normally find deep-sea fish in, and yet I was going even deeper than that. 20,000 feet. So close. I continued to sink. 25,000 feet. Soon. And finally. 30,000 feet. You still doing alright, honey? Yeah, I'm doing good, I assured her. I was so close. By this point, my real work had begun. I'd engaged the lights and begun documenting what little I could see using the onboard cameras. Granted, there wasn't much life at these depths, and what little there was scarcely documented. Most of what was down here consisted of invertebrates and microscopic life that seemed to float past my viewport. The light seemed to draw a few creatures in search of food. Small, hardy things that resembled shrimp. How's it looking, Grayson? Dark, I said, half joking. We've got some life. Shrimp, they're translucent. Can't get a great look at them, but we'll see what the cameras pick up. They've recognized you as a friend, Sheila said. I could almost see the smile on her lips as she said it. Yeah, I replied. Tempura sent them a message, told them I'd be down. How am I looking on depth? 35,000 feet. You seen a bottom yet? No. Not that I would until I was there. Damn, how deep does this go? It can't go that deep, I murmured, although I really wasn't so sure about that. The submarine continued to sink. 36,000 feet. 37,000 feet. 38,000 feet. And then finally, just past the 39,000 foot mark, I finally saw solid ground below me. Looking through my viewport, I could see a familiar dark brown diatomaceous sludge covering the seafloor. Microscopic life, likely similar to what had been observed in other deep-sea trenches, such as the Challenger Deep. I needed to gather a sample. As my submarine reached the bottom, I extended the mechanical arms, pressed flat against the surface of the tempura, and opened the collection port near the bottom of the ship. Slowly, I sifted some of the sludge into the port. My disturbance of the seafloor kicked up a cloud of the microbial colony, and I could have sworn I saw something wriggling through the debris. A pale, white thing. Perhaps some sort of sea cucumber? I hastily angled my submarine's camera to try to catch a glimpse of it, before returning to my collection. Even in this forlorn place, there was still so much to see. And here I was, completely forgetting my fear as the excitement took hold of me. Few people had ever been down to these unfathomable depths. And yet, here I was. It didn't feel real, but it was. I had reached the deepest part of the ocean. How's it going down there? I heard Sheila ask. Her voice was a little garbled. The connection down here was faltering. "It's beautiful," I said. "I can't wait for you to see it." "I'll bet." "I'm going to do a sweep of the sea, see what samples I can gather," I said. "What's my time right now?" 3 hours. You've got 9 before your connection to the weight deteriorates and you start to ascend." "I'll make the most of it," I said. The plan was only to stay down there for 6 hours, and I didn't want to push that limit. Life support would only last me for so long, and one little error was all it would take for the ungodly pressure down here to crush me. I began to move the submarine. Mobility was limited. This thing wasn't built to travel far, but I still had some limited movement. I recorded all that I could, filming the shrimp that investigated my light, and the things that slithered and crawled through the muck, likely feeding on the carpet of single-celled organisms that populated these depths. The first 2 hours were, well, I hesitate to call them uneventful. They were actually very fascinating, but little of note happened beyond my recording of a few specimens. Midway through the 3rd hour, though, as I was reaching one of the rock walls of the abyss, I noticed something just above the edge of my viewport swimming away from the light. I could have sworn I saw slender, pale tentacles of some sort. Was that a squid? Were there squid down this deep? I wasn't aware of any species of known squid that could reach these depths, but in this unknown place, what was the known? I moved my light and my camera to try to catch another glimpse of it, but whatever it was, it seemed to be gone. Maybe I'd see another one. I still had plenty of time. "You made a noise. What did you see?" Sheila asked. "Something big, I think." "Down there? Like a fish?" "Squid. You wouldn't find any vertebrates down this deep. The pressure would crush their bones." "Jeez." I didn't reply to that, still searching for the thing I'd seen. I shone my light up the walls of the chasm and angled my camera up as far as it would go. I could see a few volcanic vents, spewing dark clouds into the darkness, and more diatoms, but not much else. Strange invertebrates crawled along the wall, small creatures no bigger than an inch long, related to isopods, perhaps. If I could collect one as a sample, I would have, although taking any of those back to the surface would surely kill them. They were built to live under the impossible pressure of these depths. Taking them to the surface world would rip them apart. I went back to my research, and it wasn't long until I saw something in the darkness, just on the edge of where my flashlight reached. Trailing white tendrils snaking their way through the darkness. My eyes narrowed as I moved the submarine forward, trying to catch whatever was in the light. I saw the shape move, its body turning. I saw its tendrils unfurling. Whatever this was, it was big. It was almost as big as the tempura, although it was also slender. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought I was looking at some sort of floating debris. But this far down? No. And debris wouldn't move like that. This had to be a deep-sea squid, or perhaps some other type of cephalopod. Something that preyed upon the various invertebrates down here, perhaps. It seemed to float, just out of sight for a bit as I tried to get closer. I angled up my light to get a better look at it. The light seemed to shine through it, like some sort of ghost, but I did manage to get a look at it. Although, that single look, made me freeze up. This thing's slender tendrils certainly resembled a cephalopod of some sort. But the rest of it? The rest of it looked like something else entirely. Its body was thin, emaciated and translucent. Yet, despite that, it still had characteristics that almost seemed human. It wasn't human, not by any stretch of the imagination, but the resemblance was there. It almost reminded me of an exhibit I'd seen in a museum once, depicting a preserved, fully removed human nervous system. I could see a similar shape in its translucent body. Its head seemed almost human as well, albeit with no eyes, and a lamprey-like mouth I could only describe as fleshy yet crab-like. Still, despite having no eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was looking at me. And that was when I felt something hit the submarine. I felt a sudden jolt of panic in my chest. For a moment, I thought the pressure had started to crush me. But no. No, everything was still fine. Something had just hit me. But what? It didn't take long before I got my answer. Another pale creature floated past my viewport, swirling gracefully in the cold, dark waters. I watched it for a moment with wide eyes, before noticing its head turning slightly toward me. Then, almost instantly, it launched itself at the submarine, darting toward me with blinding speed. I heard a distinct thud as its body collided with me, and I could see its pale tendrils pressing against the viewport, twisting and writhing violently. It was trying to attack me. The first creature that I'd seen lunged as well, pounding on my submarine with another thud. And moments later, I could hear more impacts against the hull. There were more of them, and they did not like having me down there. "What's going on?" Sheila asked. "Somebody doesn't like me," I said. "One of the animals down here, it's some kind of squid. It just started attacking the hull." "How bad is the damage?" "Not sure. It could be nothing, could be..." I felt the submarine shake as I tried to move it. The thrusters that pushed me forward weren't responding. Had something gotten caught in it? One of these creatures, perhaps? "Grayson?" Sheila asked. "Lost propulsion," I said. "Fuck, I can't move." "Then drop the weight and come up." "No, it's fine. There's no other damage. I can still use the port and starboard thrusters to..." "Grayson!" I paused. There was genuine panic in her voice. Enough to make me realize that even if these things stood little chance of actually breaching the hull, taking the risk would be a fatal mistake. "I'm on my way up," I finally said, before reaching out to disengage the ballast weights. Immediately, I felt myself beginning to rise, although the tentacles clinging to my viewport didn't disappear. "We've got you," Sheila said, rising up to 38,000 feet. The submarine continued to rise, but the creatures clinging to me went nowhere. In fact, I was sure I could see more of them. More pale shapes coming up through the darkness. And these ones filled me with dread. I thought I had been looking at some sort of eerie, undiscovered life. But seeing what was coming up toward me now, I knew that I was looking at so much more. The creatures swimming up toward me through the darkness carried weapons. Makeshift stone spears and daggers. Primitive tools, but tools all the same. Signs that these were more than just undiscovered animals. Much, much more. The word mermaids crossed through my mind, but these were something far different than the ones I'd heard of in folklore. These looked like they'd swam out of the depths of hell itself. Boneless, pale tendrils reached for me, and they were getting closer. The pale shapes reached my submarine as I rose higher. I kept praying to whatever god may be listening that the dropping pressure would force them off. The air in a submarine is pressurized, so during normal operation, there should have been no danger of decompression sickness for me. For them? Well, normally I'd feel a little guilty about subjecting an undiscovered species of deep-sea mermaids to the horrors of the bends, but given my circumstances, I didn't have a lot of other options. They didn't let go, though. They should have, but they didn't. What were these things? I saw a splayed hand press against my viewport, or it somewhat resembled a hand. It had suckers on it like a tentacle, and the fingers curled open like tentacles. The creature crawled over my viewport, clinging to the tempura as it rose, and I could see the folds of its crab-like mouth opening and pressing up against the glass. I could see some sort of bile rising up through its translucent throat before it secreted it all over my viewport. Was it trying to digest me? Was that how these things fed? How strong were its stomach acids? Were they strong enough to... The window cracked. My heart skipped a beat. No. Grayson, what's wrong? They cracked the window. Sheila. Oh, God. Oh, fuck. They did what? It's secreting some sort of enzyme. It's on the window. Fuck. I'm gonna die. You're not gonna die, baby. Just keep ascending, okay? You're at 30,000 feet. Just keep going. I nodded and kept on rising. Although the question of whether or not the rest of the creatures were trying to digest the other parts of my submarine floated through my mind. How much damage could the tempura take before it imploded? How much longer did I have? The submarine still continued to rise. 25,000 feet. Almost halfway home. Almost. The creature outside my viewport slithered along the glass, searching for a better area to try to digest. Past him, I noticed a few of his companions dropping off. Maybe the change in pressure was finally getting to them. From the corner of my eye, I suddenly noticed a flashing light. A warning. The hydraulics on one of the tempura's arms were shot. What else was damaged? I checked my oxygen levels. 32%. I should have had at least 14 hours of air. I'd only been down there for about 6 hours. I shouldn't have been this low. 31%. No. They've damaged the air tanks. 30%. 29%. 20,000 feet, Sheila said. You still with me, baby? Yeah, I said. I didn't mention my air situation. I didn't need to worry her further. The submarine continued its ascent. 15,000 feet. 24%. I was running out of time. The creatures still clung to the tempura. How had the pressure change not killed them yet? My oxygen was dropping faster than before. I was hemorrhaging air. Another crack formed across my viewport. I let out a little, involuntary gasp before trying to force myself to stop hyperventilating. Grayson, what was that? It's fine, I stammered. It's fine. Grayson, what the hell's going on down there? They're still on the submarine. They're still... I paused, looking at my oxygen levels. 19%. 19% of what? Grayson, what's going on? I paused. 18%. Air. I'm losing air. That's fine, you're gonna make it, she said, although I heard her voice cracking a little. You're gonna make it. I didn't answer. 12,000 feet. 11,000 feet. My oxygen level continued to drop. 15%. 14%. 12%. 9,000 feet. The creature still clung to me as the submarine continued to rise. The one on my viewport was still there, slowly crawling along the glass again. I stared into its eyeless face and swore I was looking at the face of my killer. 7,000 feet. Oxygen had dropped to 9%. It dropped to 8% before I even got to 6,000 feet. I was gonna die here. The viewport cracked again, and I squeezed my eyes shut. The submarine rocked. I was sure one of the thrusters had been damaged. My ascent slowed. Grayson, what's going on? I'm sorry, Sheila. Another crack spread across my viewport. I'm not making it back up. Yes, you are. I'm sorry. The tears started to come as the reality of my death became clearer and clearer. This was it. You're coming back up, you hear me? God damn it, I'll bring you back up. I love you. That creature's face pressed against the glass. It vomited more of its stomach acid onto the cracked glass, and I wondered if this might be finally what broke it. Part of me hoped it would be. The one good thing about dying this deep was that at least I'd die quickly. My suffering would be over. Then the creature suddenly pulled back, twisting and writhing violently. I saw other shapes moving past in the water, other mermaids that had been clinging to the submarine. Something was agitating them. Something was scaring them off. Then I heard it, over the radio. Whale songs. What the hell? Grayson, are you still there? They're finally breaking off. Sheila, what did you do? I'm broadcasting some of the orca recordings we've been using. Are they still clinging to you? No, they're backing off. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The submarine kept rising. 5,000 feet. 4,000 feet. 4% oxygen. I could still do this, right? The submarine continued to rise. 3%. 3,000 feet. 2,000 feet. 2%. 1,000 feet. So close. I was so close. I could almost see the surface through my viewport, rushing up toward me. I tried not to breathe, tried not to move. All I did was hope. 500 feet. I closed my eyes. Grayson, we have your signal. We're coming to pick you up. Sheila's voice sounded so far away as my submarine finally breached the surface of the water. And with the last of my strength, I pulled the emergency release on the hatch and threw it open, taking in lungful after lungful of fresh, salty air. I didn't dare so much as touch the water beneath me, but I was topside again. And in the distance, I could see the burger. We see you, Sheila said. We've got you, baby. We've got you. I see you too, I said through the tears. Thank you. Thank you. I didn't have any words left in me after that. As soon as I was back on the ship, I collapsed into Sheila's arms, breaking down into tears as I clung to her, terrified that at any moment some sort of unspoken other shoe would drop and I'd lose her all over again. Shh, it's all right, baby. I've got you. You're safe. You're safe. I felt her fingers running through my hair, and I knew that what she said was true. I was home. I was safe. I left my colleagues to review the data that the Tempura had gathered during its short expedition. As far as I know, they haven't published anything. I have a few ideas as to why, but I'll keep those to myself. Let's just say that some people would rather this information not become public. I have a feeling that the Tempura may not be diving again for some time, if ever. I will confess that I do consider that a bit of a shame. Despite everything, I would consider it a success. It endured far more stressful conditions than I had ever expected, and from what I heard, required fewer repairs than I thought it would. But even if it was approved for another dive, it wouldn't be me piloting it. No. I will never be setting foot inside of that machine again, nor will I ever be returning to what my colleagues have been quietly referring to as the Jenner Trench. I can't. Every night I wake up crying after dreaming of pale shapes outside my cracked viewport, clinging to Sheila and sobbing. I can't put myself in that situation again. I can't. Instead, I think I'm going to spend the next few years on solid ground. There's a teaching position available at a local university. I think that might be the best place for me right now. Who knows? Maybe I can help some other deadbeat discover a passion for marine biology. After everything, my love for the sea remains unchanged. I'm just a little more weary of it these days. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupeHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.